The Thanksgiving turkey was still warm when Celia dropped the bomb. She didn't just ruin dinner, she shattered 30 years of family illusion. Luke's secret, a meticulously hidden $12.6 million fortune, was suddenly the centerpiece, and his family's greed was about to carve him up faster than the roast. The Sterling family home in Oak Brook, Illinois, smelled of sage, roasted butter, and decades of unspoken resentments. It was an impeccably decorated, upper-middle-class fortress where appearances were fiercely guarded. Luke Sterling, 31, and dressed in a faded charcoal sweater, sat quietly at the edge of the mahogany dining table, perfectly content to blend into the wallpaper. He was the quiet middle child, the tech nerd who had spent the last 5 years, supposedly tinkering with code, in a cramped Chicago apartment. What the family didn't know was that Luke's tinkering was a highly sophisticated cybersecurity encryption algorithm called Aegis 7. 8 months prior, a major Silicon Valley conglomerate had quietly acquired Luke's company. After the brutal California taxes, legal fees, and the buyout of his silent partner, Luke was left with exactly $12.6 million. He had parked it safely in a series of diversified accounts managed by a private wealth firm, Bessemer Trust, and changed absolutely nothing about his life. He still drove a 6-year-old Subaru Outback. He still bought his coffee from the corner bodega. He knew his family. He knew that money changed the molecular structure of relationships. Across the table sat his younger sister, Celia. At 27, Celia was the golden child. She possessed a chaotic, expensive energy, her life a revolving door of maxed-out credit cards, failed lifestyle businesses, and constant bailouts from their parents, Arthur and Beatrice. Beside her sat Derek Chambers, her fiancé of 3 months. Derek was a man who wore too much cologne, sported a meticulously trimmed beard, and talked incessantly about Web3, venture capital, and his imminent success in the crypto market. "So, Luke," Derek began, swirling his Cabernet in a glass that Beatrice only brought out for holidays. "Still doing the freelance computer thing? The market's tough out there for gig workers." Luke offered a mild, non-committal smile. "It pays the rent, Derek. I get by." "You should really look into upskilling," Derek advised, slicing into his turkey. "I have a buddy over at a fintech startup. They need guys for the back end. Pay is decent, 70, maybe 80 grand if you can pass the technicals. Let me know. I can put in a good word." "I appreciate it," Luke said, focusing on his mashed potatoes. Arthur, sitting at the head of the table, cleared his throat. "Luke just needs to apply himself. He's always been content to just drift. Not like Celia. Celia is a visionary." Beatrice beamed at her daughter. "Celia's new event planning business is going to take off. The branding alone is stunning." Celia preened, her diamond engagement ring catching the light of the chandelier. The ring, Luke happened to know, was financed on a high-interest credit card in Derek's name, a fact Derek had drunkenly let slip a month ago. "Actually," Celia said, her voice slicing through the clinking of silverware, "I have a little toast to make." She stood up, smoothing the front of her designer dress. She picked up her wine glass, tapping it with a knife. Clink, clink, clink. "Thanksgiving is about family," Celia began, a sugary smile plastered on her face. "It's about sharing our blessings. And honestly, we have a massive blessing at this table that someone has been hiding." Luke felt a strange, cold prickle at the back of his neck. He looked up. Celia was staring directly at him, her eyes glittering with a predatory triumph. When Luke was fixing the Wi-Fi router in the den earlier, Celia continued, her voice rising in theatrical pitch. He left his laptop open. "I was just trying to pull up Mum's old cranberry sauce recipe from his email." Luke froze. He hadn't just left his laptop open. He had been logging into his secure client portal with his wealth manager, Richard Hayes, to authorize a quarterly tax payment. "Imagine my shock," Celia said, reaching into the pocket of her dress and pulling out a neatly folded piece of printer paper, when the first thing on the screen wasn't a recipe, but a portfolio summary from Bessemer Trust. Silence descended on the dining room, heavy, suffocating, and absolute. "Celia, what are you talking about?" Arthur asked, his brow furrowing. Celia unfolded the paper. She had actually printed the screen. "I'm talking about my big brother, the freelancer who can barely pay rent. The summary states that his liquid assets, municipal bonds, and index funds currently total $12,642,000. Beatrice dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against her china plate. Derek stopped chewing, his jaw hanging slightly slack. Luke felt the blood drain from his face. The violation of his privacy was staggering, but it was the look in Celia's eyes that terrified him. It wasn't shock. It wasn't pride for her brother's success. It was the frantic, calculating gaze of someone who had just found a winning lottery ticket on the sidewalk. "You," Arthur stammered, looking from the paper in Celia's hand to his son. "Luke, is this some kind of joke? A fake document?" Luke took a slow, deep breath. He looked at his sister, his voice dangerously quiet. "You went through my private financial records. You printed them." "Don't change the subject," Celia shrieked, slamming the paper onto the table next to the gravy boat. "You've been sitting there in your stupid cheap sweaters, letting Mom and Dad pay for my car repairs last month, letting me stress over paying for my wedding, while you are a literal multi-millionaire." "It's my money, Celia," Luke said, his tone turning to ice. "Earned from a company I built from the ground up for 7 years. It has nothing to do with you." "Nothing to do with us?" Beatrice gasped, clutching her napkin to her chest as if she had been physically struck. "Luke Thomas Sterling, you have tens of millions of dollars, and you let your father work overtime at the firm at his age. You let your sister take out loans." "He didn't let anyone do anything," Luke retorted, his pulse hammering. "Dad works because he refuses to retire, and Celia takes out loans because she spends money like it's water. My financial status doesn't change her spending habits." Derek leaned forward. The sleazy, patronizing tone entirely vanished, replaced by a sharp, hungry intensity. 12.6 million post-tax implies an exit of around 25 mil, assuming standard capital gains and legal haircuts. Bro, you sold a company and didn't tell your own flesh and blood? "Because of exactly this," Luke said, gesturing to the table. "Because the second the turkey is cut, I become a bank." "How dare you!" Beatrice cried, genuine tears welling in her eyes. The illusion of the loving family dinner was dead, replaced by the ugly, raw reality of unchecked greed. The betrayal wasn't that Luke had kept a secret. The betrayal in their eyes was that he hadn't immediately surrendered his success to feed their dysfunction. The remnants of the Thanksgiving feast sat cooling on the table, forgotten. The atmosphere in the Oakbrook dining room had morphed from a festive gathering into a hostile boardroom negotiation. Luke remained seated, his posture rigid. He watched as the family he thought he knew recalibrated their entire perception of him. He was no longer Luke, the quiet son. He was an unmined resource. "Let's just all take a breath," Arthur said, though his eyes kept darting back to the printed portfolio summary Celia had tossed on the table. "Luke, obviously this is a shock. We are hurt, deeply hurt that you felt you couldn't trust us with this news. We are your family." "Trust you?" Luke scoffed, his gaze locking onto his sister. Celia just admitted to snooping through my laptop, printing highly confidential financial documents, and ambushing me at a holiday dinner. That is the exact opposite of trustworthy behavior. "Oh, please, play the victim," Celia snapped, pacing behind her chair. "You lied by omission for months. Do you know how much stress I've been under? Derek and I have been trying to finalize the wedding venues, and everything is so expensive. And you just sat there, hoarding millions." Derek nodded solemnly, sliding an arm around Celia's waist. "It's about community, Luke. When one of us succeeds, we all succeed. That's how strong families operate." "Is that right, Derek?" Luke asked, leaning back. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like when I succeed, you suddenly want to profit." "That's unfair," Beatrice interjected, dabbing her eyes. "Luke, we paid for your undergraduate degree at the State University. We put a roof over your head. We nurtured you. It is entirely reasonable for your sister to expect a little help now that you've hit the jackpot." "Hit the jackpot?" Luke repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "Mum, I didn't buy a scratch-off ticket. I worked 80-hour weeks for 7 years. I slept under my desk. I sacrificed relationships, my health, my 20s. I built an encryption protocol that secured private medical data. That's not a jackpot. That's my life's work." "And nobody is taking that away from you," Celia said, waving a hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. "But let's be realistic, Luke. You have $12 million. You don't even like spending money. You're basically a monk." She walked over to her purse, pulling out a sleek leather notebook. The sheer level of premeditation sent a chill down Luke's spine. She hadn't just found the document moments ago. She had found it, digested it, and formulated a business plan. "Derek and I were running some numbers," Celia said, flipping the notebook open. "Since Mum and Dad are on a fixed income, it's only right that you cover the wedding. We found the perfect spot at Villa del Balbianello in Lake Como. For 150 guests, flights, accommodations, and the event itself, we're looking at about $300,000. Luke stared at her, genuinely speechless. "Then," Celia continued, tapping a manicured fingernail against the page, "there's Derek's business. He's got this incredible Web3 logistics platform, but the venture capital market is tight right now. A seed investment of $500,000 would get them to launch, and of course, he'd give you a 2% equity stake." 2% for $500,000 on a company with no product? Luke said, his voice flat. "That's a valuation of $25 million. You're delusional." Derek flushed, his jaw tightening. "The IP is solid, Luke. You just don't understand the blockchain space. I wrote cryptographic protocols for a living, Derek. I understand it perfectly. It's a scam," Luke shot back. Celia slammed the notebook on the table. "Stop insulting my fiancé. And I'm not done. Mom and Dad have a mortgage on this house. It's about $400,000 left. You can pay that off tomorrow. And Derek and I need a house. We were looking at Calabasas. Nothing crazy, just a starter home." $2.5 million. Arthur coughed into his hand. "Luke, obviously Celia is throwing out a lot of numbers, but paying off the mortgage on the family home, that would be a tremendous relief for your mother and me. It's the honorable thing to do." Luke looked at his father. Arthur Sterling, a man who had always preached hard work and self-reliance, was now sitting with his hand out, completely comfortable letting his son foot the bill for his retirement. "Let me get this straight," Luke said slowly, doing the mental math. "You want me to drop $3.7 million, nearly a third of my total net worth, on a luxury wedding, a failed crypto startup, a California mansion, and your mortgage. All because you found out I have it. It's not about the money, it's about what the money represents," Beatrice cried. It represents security for your family. How can you be so selfish?" "Selfish?" Luke stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. "I am not a trust fund. I am not an ATM. The answer is no, to all of it. Not a dime." Celia's face contoured into a mask of pure rage. "You greedy, pathetic loser." "I'm leaving," Luke said, turning toward the hallway to grab his coat. "Wait," Derek said. His voice had lost all pretense of familial warmth. It was cold, hard, and threatening. Luke stopped, looking back over his shoulder. Derek pulled his phone from his pocket. "You know Luke, my buddy at the fintech firm? He knows a lot of guys at the tech blogs in Chicago. And Celia here has a massive list of all our extended family. Cousins, aunts, uncles, the ones struggling to pay for their kids' braces. Plus, there's your ex-girlfriend, Sarah, who you broke up with right before the sale went through, right? Wonder how she'd feel, knowing you dumped her to avoid splitting the payout." Luke felt a dangerous surge of adrenaline. "Are you blackmailing me, Derek?" "I'm just saying," Derek smirked, leaning against the doorframe. $12 million buys a lot of peace and quiet. But if you walk out that door and cut off your own flesh and blood, it's going to get really loud out there. Everyone's going to know about Luke Sterling's secret fortune. You'll have charities, cousins, and old friends knocking on your door every hour of the day. Your quiet little life, gone." Arthur and Beatrice said nothing. They looked away, staring at the floor, tacitly endorsing the extortion through their silence. Luke looked at his parents, the profound realization settling over him that the family he grew up with was dead. Perhaps they never existed at all. They were just people waiting for a payout. "Go ahead," Luke whispered, his voice dangerously calm. "Tell them. Tell the blogs. Tell the cousins. Tell Sarah." He pulled on his coat, buttoning it deliberately. "You think you can threaten me, Derek?" Luke said, his eyes burning into the other man's. "I spent 7 years building digital fortresses to keep out Russian hackers and corporate spies. You're a guy who sells fake internet coins from his mother-in-law's basement. You have no idea what war looks like." Luke turned the handle of the front door, the bitter November wind rushing into the foyer. "If any of you contact me again with a demand," Luke said, addressing the room one last time, "I won't just say no. I will make sure my lawyers dismantle every single financial safety net you have." He stepped out into the cold, letting the heavy oak door slam shut behind him, severing his ties to the Sterling family forever. As he walked down the driveway toward his frozen Subaru, he pulled out his phone and dialed his wealth manager's private number. It was time to lock everything down. The heater in Luke's Subaru struggled against the bitter Chicago wind as he pulled onto the I-88 East. His phone was already lighting up on the passenger seat. 3 missed calls from his mother, 2 texts from his father, and 1 photo message from Derek. Luke didn't need to open the image to know what it was. A screenshot of a drafted email addressed to a prominent tech journalist at TechCrunch, CCing a dozen extended family members. The subject line read, "The secret $12 million acquisition of Aegis 7. A story of greed." Luke connected his phone to the car's Bluetooth and dialed a number he rarely used outside of quarterly reviews. "Luke," the calm, cultured voice of Thomas Gallagher answered on the second ring. Gallagher was a senior managing director at Bessemer Trust. "Thomas, we have a security breach," Luke said, his voice remarkably steady, despite the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "My family accessed my client portal. They know the exact liquid figure. They are currently attempting to extort me for roughly $3.7 million, threatening to go to the tech press and my extended family if I don't comply." There was a brief, professional pause on the line. I see. I will flag your accounts immediately for verbal-only authorization with a secondary passcode. No electronic transfers will clear without my personal oversight. Do you need me to contact our affiliated crisis management team? I need a litigator, Luke corrected, merging onto the highway. A shark. Someone who handles corporate extortion and defamation. Money is no object. I will connect you with a senior partner at Kirkland and Ellis by tomorrow morning, Gallagher assured him. Until then, do not respond to any of their communications. Let them make the first move in writing. It builds the paper trail. Luke took Gallagher's advice. For 48 hours he remained a ghost. He blocked his family's numbers on his personal phone, packed a suitcase, and checked into a secure executive suite at the Langham Hotel downtown. By Saturday evening, the silence proved too much for Derek's fragile ego and Celia's desperate need for attention. They executed their threat, but in the sloppiest, most predictable way possible. Derek didn't go to TechCrunch, likely because a reputable journalist would require actual proof of a crime, not just whining about a wealthy brother-in-law. Instead, Derek leaked the story to a mid-tier Silicon Valley gossip blog, framing Luke as a ruthless tech bro who abandoned his destitute working-class parents. Hours later, Celia posted a tearful, highly edited video on TikTok. Sitting in her expensive Oak Brook bedroom, she wiped away non-existent tears, claiming her brother was hoarding millions while their elderly parents faced financial ruin, and her modest dream wedding had to be cancelled. The video hit the algorithm perfectly. Within 12 hours, it had 3 million views. Luke's inbox was flooded with vitriol from strangers, distant cousins demanding loans, and former college acquaintances suddenly remembering how close they used to be. Sitting in his hotel suite, Luke watched the chaos unfold on his laptop. He didn't feel angry anymore. He felt a cold, calculating clarity. On Monday morning, Luke sat in a glass-walled conference room at Kirkland and Ellis, across from a ruthless litigator named Evelyn Vance. Luke handed her a thick dossier. "They want to play in the mud," Luke told Evelyn, adjusting his cuffs. "I want to pave over it." Evelyn reviewed the documents. "The defamation suit is a slam dunk. Your sister's video makes verifiable, false claims about your parents' financial status and your legal obligations to them. But a lawsuit takes time. You want to hit them where it hurts now?" "Derek's company," Luke said, sliding a second folder across the mahogany table. "He calls it a Web3 logistics platform, Chainroot. Over the weekend, I did a little digging into the public blockchain ledgers he claims to use, cross-referencing them with the seed investors he bragged about at Thanksgiving." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, opening the folder. "It's a shell game," Luke explained, his tone clinical. "There is no proprietary algorithm. He's taking unaccredited investor money under a fraudulent Regulation D exemption and using new investor funds to pay phantom dividends to the early backers. More importantly, he's skimming from the top to fund my sister's lifestyle. That diamond engagement ring? Paid for by a wire transfer from a Chainroot corporate account." Evelyn's eyes gleamed with a predatory satisfaction. Wire fraud, commingling of funds, unregistered securities. "Exactly," Luke said softly. "Don't just sue him for extortion. Draft a whistleblower complaint. Submit it directly to the SEC Enforcement Division and FinCEN. Let's see how his venture capital buddies feel about a federal subpoena. The wheels of federal justice usually grind slowly, but when handed a perfectly documented roadmap of wire fraud wrapped in trendy crypto buzzwords, they move with terrifying speed. 10 days after Thanksgiving, the illusion of the Sterling family shattered permanently. Celia was at a luxury bridal boutique in downtown Chicago, sipping complimentary champagne and trying on a $12,000 Vera Wang gown she fully expected Derek to pay for. Her phone buzzed. It was Derek. He didn't say hello. He was hyperventilating. They froze everything. Derek gasped, the sound of tearing paper and slamming drawers echoing in the background. The feds, Celia. The SEC showed up at the co-working space. They froze the corporate accounts. They froze my personal checking. Celia lowered her champagne flute, the blood draining from her face. What are you talking about? Just transfer the money from your savings. I have to put the deposit down on the dress today. There is no savings, Derek screamed, his polished veneer completely disintegrating. It's gone. Luke tipped them off. He found out about the offshore transfers. I have to go. Do not tell anyone I called. The line went dead. That was the last time Celia ever spoke to her fiancé. Derek boarded a one-way flight to Dubai that evening, a country with notoriously complicated extradition treaties for white-collar crime, leaving his entire life and his fiancée behind. The fallout was catastrophic and immediate. Without Derek's fraudulent cash flow, Celia's lavish lifestyle collapsed overnight. The credit cards she had maxed out under the assumption that Derek, or Luke, would pay them off suddenly went to collections. The exclusive Villa del Balbianello in Italy kept her $50,000 non-refundable deposit. Desperate, Celia ran back to her parents in Oak Brook, sobbing and begging them to bail her out of the $80,000 of high-interest debt she had accrued in just 3 months. Arthur and Beatrice, horrified by the scandal and the public humiliation of Derek fleeing the country, went to Chase Bank to apply for a home equity line of credit. They figured they could quietly pay off Celia's debts and weather the storm. They sat in the branch manager's office, expecting a simple signature. Instead, the manager looked at them with a mixture of pity and severe concern. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling," the manager said quietly, "I can't approve this HELOC. In fact, I'm legally obligated to inform you that your home is already severely over-leveraged. There is a secondary commercial lien on this property for $600,000. Arthur gripped the edge of the desk. "A lien? That's impossible. We've been paying down our mortgage for 20 years. The manager slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was authorized 4 months ago. The guarantor listed is Derek Chambers. He used your property as collateral for a business loan for Chainroute. Your electronic signatures are on the authorization forms." Beatrice let out a strangled cry, burying her face in her hands. Celia, who had accompanied them, backed away toward the door, her eyes wide with terror. Derek hadn't just scammed his investors. He had secretly convinced Arthur and Beatrice to sign documents they didn't understand, framing it as routine paperwork for a background check, so he could drain the equity from their home. With Derek gone, the bank called the loan. The family home, the fortress of appearances they cared so deeply about, was placed into foreclosure within 60 days. They tried to call Luke. They called his old number, his email, his social media. They left voicemails alternating between furious demands that he fix the mess, to pathetic, weeping apologies, begging for his help. They promised Celia would go to rehab for her spending. They promised they would disown Derek. Luke never heard a single one of those messages. Evelyn Vance and the team at Kirkland and Ellis had established an impenetrable legal firewall. Any communication from the family was intercepted, logged as evidence of ongoing harassment, and filed away. 3 months later, Luke stood on the balcony of his new penthouse in Tribeca, New York. The city lights glittered below him like a sea of diamonds, oblivious to the drama he had left behind in the Midwest. He held a glass of expensive bourbon, the winter air biting but refreshing. He had recently funded a promising new cybersecurity startup. On his own terms, with people he vetted meticulously. He had protected his peace. His family had demanded he fund their lives, entirely blind to the fact that their greed was the very thing that destroyed them. The hard karma had come full circle. Luke took a sip of his bourbon, turned his back to the cold wind, and walked inside his quiet, secure home.